When he was about to leave, someone calls out to him from behind. It was the team leader of the development team, and also his ex-girlfriend. They had been together for 7 years. They were happy throughout that time. He was naturally lazy, and she was a born workaholic. And for some reason, even though everything was going fine, she suddenly dumped him. 6 months after the breakup, she had someone new by her side. He asks how her new relationship was going, and she tells him that it was going well. He didn't feel good hearing that from her. But regardless, he wishes her well, and she tells him to stop being petty and continue working. While looking at the screen, he asks if the character he was fixing was actually a boss, since he was so easily killed. She tells him that the more scenarios that pass, the stronger he gets. The difficulty depends on the player's choices. She asks if he knew that the character was modeled after him. Looking at her, he seems confused. She giggles and asks if he didn't notice the similarities they shared. She also tells him that it was the reason she killed the character as soon as she met him in-game. She also mentions that his personality was similar to that of the character. While talking, he notices something outside. He asks if it wasn't her new boyfriend outside waiting for her. He asks her not to keep him waiting and tells her to go to him. She says that she will and leaves with a wave. After thinking for a few minutes, he decides to test the new character changes one more time. He finds it harsh that the villainous character was modeled after him. As a child, Deku was called a magical genius and put on a pedestal. However, he was just like any other average mage. And because of his arrogance and noble background, he ends up with the worst personality. He can get stronger, but he was always surrounded by those who hated him. Woojin wonders if he should add more attributes or personality traits to make the character a little stronger, especially now that he knows the character was modeled after him. He adds comprehension, wealthy, Midas touch, sharp eyes, Iron Man. At the end, he ended up adding everything that looked good. Feeling a little ashamed about it, he decides to quickly revert the changes. Just then, he gets a notification on his phone. It was the storyteller, asking if Woojin needed anything to be changed on the models, and told him to change it himself. Woojin says that he was just looking at the model. The storyteller laughs and asks Woojin to look outside the window. When he looks outside, there was a circular cloud with lightning all around it. The lightning strikes, and his mind goes blank. When he was conscious again, he wonders where he was. He hears a man warning someone about Deku, saying that Deku is no tame man. Even though he may seem hesitant, he always has something else up his sleeve. Deku is just downplaying his own talents. He is a vile villain, the man says. After that, he hears a woman shouting Deku name. And when he opens his eyes, the girl next to him asks if he was planning to stay cooped up in his room forever just because of some woman, and asks if he was trying to bring shame to the entire family. She throws the papers she was carrying on the ground and asks him to get off his arse if he didn't want to get fired. After that strange sky appeared outside his window, he woke up in this body, in a strange place, and it had already been a week since then. He was in the world that he had once developed. The scenery was somewhat familiar, and he was the worst character in the game, the one who can't escape death no matter what. The man fated to die. The villain, Deku. He gathers the papers the woman had thrown on his floor. They were research papers, and the woman who threw them was his half-sister, Yariel. They didn't have a good relationship with each other, and the woman his sister spoke about was probably Julie. He assumes that Deku had something happen with his fiancée, Julia. His sister told him that he should get up if he didn't want to get fired from this fancy professor job. He decides to go to the lecture, even though he's never given a lecture before. He gets up from his bed and goes to the bathroom to prepare. He realizes that he possesses all the attributes he gave Deku before he possessed him. His bathroom looks more like a luxurious swimming pool. Although his environment and attire feel foreign to him, he makes use of them without much thought, like he has lived as Deku his entire life. Usually, he would feel weird wearing anything other than office attire, but here, he feels elegant and comfortable in these clothes. It's as if his body was telling him that this is his body now. The formalities he once found rigid as Wu Jin now felt natural. He is a noble. He felt like a superior member of the nobility. But Wu Jin, a regular man, objectively tall and handsome. And to quote his ex-girlfriends, a pathetic, lazy bastard. He says that he won't lose himself to the power trip. He walks up to the car with a driver waiting for him. He had never been in such a nice car before. Thinking about the expensive car brought up some memories that pissed him off. He notices someone sitting next to him and wonders who that was. The kid next to him greets him and presents him with some papers. He wonders if the kid was an assistant or a secretary and asks him if he was a wizard. The kid says that he has been at Deculane's service for 3 years already. The document, he thought it was lecture material, but it was a script for him to read. It contained all the information needed for the lecture from start to finish. Wu Jin tells the kid that he did a good job. The kid was surprised to hear that. When Wu Jin asks him to rest until they got to the university, even the driver was surprised that he gave a compliment to someone. Wu Jin himself felt sick from complimenting another person. He wondered if it was Deculane's real self resisting. They reached the university, an eye-catching building with marvelous architecture. He remembers that the letter noted he had to go to the Roteo Hall. The students were murmuring about how fortunate they were to finally get to listen to his lecture. They say they heard he was a master of spell interpretation and apparently a child prodigy. He gets everyone's attention and introduces himself before starting the lecture. Some of the girls already fall in love, saying how handsome, smart, and cool he was. One student wonders how that was cool. She declares him an enemy of her father. 3 years ago, her father ended his life. He had devoted himself to researching spell interpretation, but due to the shock he received when someone extorted his thesis from him, he fell into despair and chose death. The person who stole that thesis was Deculaine. However, she couldn't do anything since she lost everything after her father passed away. Even though she was born noble, she lost everything of value, including her family house and their territory. She became an orphan without a home. She pledged back then to take revenge on the man responsible. After that, she worked with enormous effort to make it into the Royal University, where Deculaine was a professor. Even though the other students don't know, she knows that the spell interpretation everyone praises him for is a bluff, stemming from her father's achievement. She wonders how he can stand in front of her so arrogantly after ruining her family. She says that his position belonged to her father. She swears to expose him and get him killed. She holds herself back, waiting for the perfect opportunity for revenge. Deculaine silences the class and says that he will be teaching a special lecture. He starts by explaining about all the 3 attributes and 9 types of magic. While teaching, he thinks that this was easier than he thought. Even though it was his first ever lecture and he was unfamiliar with magic theory, he was able to perfectly understand everything. One of the attributes Wu Jin gave Deculaine before possessing him was making all the students focus, making it feel natural instead of overpowering. He tells his students that as much as hard work is important, if they didn't have the talent, then they needed to choose and focus. Wu Jin thinks that it was fitting of Deculaine to say this. He was not talented himself. His mana at its peak right now is 3,300, while there were named mages with more than 30,000 mana. Wu Jin finds it amazing how Deculaine used to do things that he should have taken notes on himself. He ends the lecture and hesitates before reading the last line of the script, because the original Deculaine would have never said it. But he says it anyway. He asks if anyone had any questions. None of the students raise their hands. Wu Jin is relieved, but just then, someone shouts his name. She says that there was a mysterious spell discovered in the dormitories the previous night. She says people have assumed it to be the act of a devil. She asks Deculaine to interpret it, since he was the so-called genius interpreter. Deculaine stops her and asks if she was really from the university. She's confused at the question. He explains that it should be second nature to her to introduce herself and her affiliation before asking questions. He says that he won't answer questions from someone who doesn't follow basic etiquette. He couldn't help but refuse to answer her question, since using his skill to comprehend it would consume an enormous amount of mana. The other students laugh at her, thinking she was just doing it for attention. While he's about to leave the class, she stops him again. She says that the magic tower was refusing to analyze the mysterious spell, and she was the only one who could do it. Without waiting for him to answer, she draws out the spell and requests him to interpret it. He almost uses all of his mana. She says that several debutantes at the dorms were analyzing the spell, but there was no progress, and asks if he can give some hints. Before she finishes her sentence, he tells her that it was barrier magic. He tells her there was no need for any hints. He says it was a bewitchment-type barrier spell that someone might be using to trap the students. She is left speechless. Later, in the cafeteria while eating, she calls him an annoying bastard. She wanted to expose that his interpretation skill was a lie using an unknown spell. But instead, she got made out to be an idiot with no manners just because she didn't state her name. She thinks that he was lying about the spell type. Bewitching magic was very difficult magic. She had just brought the spell drawn in the dorms because she thought it was to increase the freshmen's research skills. She calls Decolain an idiot for outing himself. One of her friends runs to her, calling her name over and over. Her friend says that after they assumed it to be a barrier and recomposed the spell, it turned out that Decolain's interpretation was right. She asks what her friend means. Her friend says that she was very brave to ask the professor. But Ephereine asks her friend to tell her about the barrier. Her friend asks if Decolain wasn't amazing to interpret it so quickly, without it having any parameters whatsoever. She couldn't believe it. Her friend thanks her and leaves to write a report about it. She thinks that he was just lucky and got it right. She feels bad for improving Decolain's reputation for nothing. She pulls out a paper outlining Decolain's course teachings. She says that it's like the saying goes, "Know your enemy, and you'll win all your battles." She says that she won't waver, even if she has to see his annoying face from now on. She promises to expose him no matter what. While walking back, Woo Jin thinks that the whole situation could have gone badly. The moment he looked at the spell, his skill automatically activated. And just looking at it was enough to drain all of his mana. He wasn't able to understand what the spell was. Even if he had twice the amount of mana he has now, he wouldn't be able to understand it. But he was glad nothing went wrong. He's pulled away from his thoughts by the person in front of him. She asks if he was doing well. It was Decolain's fiancé, someone destined to become the pinnacle of knighthood. He tells her that he's been fine. She asks why he was fine despite breaking the promise they made a week ago. Woo Jin doesn't remember any promise. He tells her he doesn't recall any promise and tries to walk past her. She steps back into his way and asks if he was running away just like before. Thinking there's no way to shake her off, he says that he had suffered a fever which made him forget some things, and asks if she could remind him what the promise was. She had asked him to promise that he would be truthful about himself, to confess his pretenses and arrogance to everyone if he wanted to be with her. But she doesn't tell him anything about the promise. She says that she was wrong to trust him and moves out of his way. He looks back at her and leaves, now that he was excused. She grits her teeth while walking away. Her engagement was one of convenience. Decolain, a talented mage, and Julie, a talented knight. With their union, her brother was sure that only good things would come, for both politics and bloodlines. No one could object to her brother's decision. It was fine, she thought. It was for the good of her household, even if she didn't like him. However, the household soon realized that his talents never existed. He had lied his way into his position as a professor. After some incident, he stopped producing results. Despite that, the two families tried to keep it quiet. Maybe because they didn't want to be the topic of gossip. They didn't want the public to think that they had made the wrong decision. But she couldn't stand it. She was okay with the marriage, but not the lies. That was her conviction as a knight. That's when she made him promise. And he agreed to do as she asked. She was surprised. But now she thinks he never meant to keep the promise in the first place. While walking around the university, he takes a moment to admire how nice it looked. A large campus and a garden that was well cared for. He and his team had spent sleepless nights together to create this atmosphere. He thought it would have been better if he were in someone else's body instead of Deculane's. Just then, he notices someone running at him. He quickly pulls his elbow back to defend himself. But it was just his assistant who falls over after getting hit and apologizes, saying he was in a hurry to see his professor. Deculane asks if his name was Zorro. The kid says his name was Alan. Deculane says he was mistaken. At his office, he asks why Alan was in such a hurry to see him. Alan explains that it's about the list of sponsorships for the new mages that year. While going through the names, Wu Jin notices that a few of the names were glowing gold. He assumes it's because of the attributes he added earlier. He figures that the names glowing gold are people who will bring in money for him. Among all the names, the girl who declared him her enemy, Ephereine Luna, shone the brightest. However, she had no sponsorships. Deculane asks Alan why she didn't have anyone backing her. Alan says that everyone might be too scared to sponsor her, thinking they would end up on Deculane's bad side if they did. But seeing that she was talented enough to make it into the university without even going through an academy, if he let things play out as is, he would end up meeting the same fate Deculane was destined for. Deculane had countless deaths in the game. A sword through the heart, a wand to the head, poison in a wine glass, a bomb on a train. And since Wu Jin doesn't plan on dying, he has to make a different choice than Deculane would have. He signs the paper and asks Alan to turn them in. After Alan leaves, Wu Jin thinks that he needs a lot of money to survive. Investing in a mage is one way. However, that alone won't be enough. There are countless people who resent Deculane in this world, those who will try to kill him whenever they get the chance. In order to survive, he needs a way out, a way to become stronger. However, with Deculane's current lack of talent, he wouldn't be able to respond properly to the dangers that lay ahead. But he had something the original Deculane never possessed: his unique attributes. Deculane might have bragged about mastering all 4 elements, but in reality, he couldn't control them. Still, what he could do was combine what he had with his new attributes, specifically, metal manipulation. This allowed him to wield levitating blades, a technique unfamiliar to this world. It wasn't mainstream magic, but it was powerful. What he lacked in natural talent, he could make up for by manipulating the properties of metal. But before reaching that level, he needed to learn the basics. So he began immediately. The moment he started, the entire room lit up with a cool blue hue. He was learning telekinesis. Fast. In just moments, he made a pen float with ease. And since he had memorized the spell completely, he didn't need a chant or incantation. He could cast it by will alone. But this was only a low-tier technique. Even with high-level telekinesis, he wouldn't reach the level he was aiming for. As he flipped through one of the magic books, a strange idea entered his mind. He wondered what would happen if he engraved magic circles not just in his mind, but all over his body. The larger the circle, the stronger its effect. If he could fully understand his own body, he wouldn't be limited to just one in the brain. He could carve one into his heart, another in his core. Dozens of them. The risks were obvious: overload, damage, maybe even death. But one of the attributes he had added was called Iron Man. It allowed his body to withstand the harsh side effects of extreme magical strain. With the last of his mana, he prepared to test the idea on himself. And the moment it began, he understood why no one had dared try it. A terrifying pain ripped through his body, as if every bone was being crushed, every muscle torn apart. But still, he didn't groan, didn't scream. He endured it with the grace of a noble. When it was over, his mana was completely drained. His body was on the brink of collapse. But he had succeeded. A single magic circle had been engraved into his shoulder. And at that rate, it would take about 2 weeks to cover his entire body. A month after his first seminar, the day of his first official lecture arrived. His students were confused. They had heard all sorts of things about Découlaine from their upperclassmen, but this class? It was nothing like they expected. Instead of a lecture, Découlaine had simply left them a message. Bring me anything from the surrounding area that's overflowing with elemental energy. And just like that, the students were wandering through the forest, searching for something to present. Ephereine wasn't surprised. She expected this kind of irresponsibility from him. Of course, he'd leave the students to figure it out themselves on day one. As she searched, someone bumped into her from behind. She turned around, ready to snap, but stopped when she saw who it was. Sylvia, a name she hadn't heard in years. One of her childhood friends, or at least she used to be. Ephereine wondered if Sylvia even recognized her. Later, while she was building her elemental object, Epherine's mind drifted back. 10 years ago, Sylvia's family had surrounded her manor with soldiers. They were afraid of Ephereine and her father's potential. So they pressured them, threatened them, and forced her to abandon magic altogether. She clenched her fists as the memories resurfaced. Just then, the elemental form she was working on vanished, like the mana had been sucked out completely. She followed the trail and found Sylvia, gathering mana to build her own element. Ephereine confronted her, asking if she realized she had stolen everything she'd just gathered. But Sylvia said nothing. That silence only made her angrier. She tried another approach, accusing Sylvia of pretending not to recognize her, of acting innocent after threatening her family, after driving her away from magic. She demanded to know if Sylvia had been so afraid of losing her spotlight that she had crushed someone else's future. Finally, Sylvia broke her silence. She claimed she didn't know Ephereine. That line was the last straw. Ephereine asked if Sylvia was looking down on her, mocking her. Sylvia calmly turned and said she'd heard about Epherine's father, the once noble man, who was now dead. That sentence shattered something in Ephereine. Blinded by rage, she snapped. To everyone's shock, she struck Sylvia, yelling at her to say it again. Sylvia quickly tried to create a barrier to defend against the attack. After the huge explosion, the other students were surprised hearing the sudden noise. Sylvia was on the ground, and Ephereine was grabbing her by the hair, asking her to repeat herself one more time. Just then, she saw some kind of weird light behind her, an unstable purple orb. It was like a void, where the two of their manas collided with the element Sylvia was constructing. The void was sucking up everything around it. The students tried to run away, seeing it was about to explode. Ephereine knew that if that thing exploded, it would shoot out metal fragments everywhere and kill everyone there. It exploded. Ephereine tried to save herself with a barrier, but nothing happened. The fragments were floating around in front of Découlaine. The fragments started moving again. They went toward him and turned into mana. The moment he used telekinesis, there were exclamations all around. Since they were students learning magic, they couldn't help but feel the beauty of magic, enchantment magic that no one could help but acknowledge the dazzling aspect of. After removing all the mana from the fragments, he piled them all up and said they would be stopping the lecture there. He told everyone except the ones who caused the commotion to leave at once. She knew she was screwed. He took them both to the interrogation room. One of the professors, who arrived a little late, tried to suck up to him and the chairwoman. The chairwoman welcomed them and apologized for the sudden summon. The professor, Relin, who was sucking up to them just now, asked who dared to lay hands on a member of a higher noble family. He said he heard it was a lowly commoner who didn't even attend an academy. He made sure to praise Découlaine in every sentence, saying it was very impressive how he managed to resolve things before they got ugly. Wu Jin realized that the old man was trying to suck up to him, but it was expected for them to pick the side of an influential noble family over a fallen nobody. He thought it would be best if he changed the results of the disciplinary meeting. Since he had arrived there, he could sense a scarlet energy pouring out of Ephereine. It seemed like only he could sense it, like it was a warning that his death was creeping nearer. The disciplinary meeting between Sylvia and Ephereine began, and immediately the old professor went off on Ephereine, saying she could have hurt a lot of students if Decoulaine didn't intervene. He asked her to tell the reason for the conflict, but she said she couldn't answer that. She knew that Decoulaine was behind the glass and didn't want him to know about her father. Sylvia looked down on her father, and she couldn't let her enemy know that was what bothered her. The old professor asked if she was joking and if it was some kind of inferiority complex she had. He said she should have remembered the difference in position between her and Sylvia. He then asked Sylvia to speak. She clearly explained that she accidentally destroyed Epherine's work, and that led to an argument. After hearing her explanation, the professors started siding with her. Some even wanted to expel Ephereine because of her violent behavior. Ephereine started to feel cold hearing all those harsh insults at the disciplinary meeting. All the scoldings aimed at her for not being able to provide any excuse, and no one to protect her. She blamed it all on Decoulaine. The chairwoman said that it seemed like the opinion had been organized. She asked Decoulaine for his opinion before they drew a conclusion. Decoulaine began by stating that he was speaking as the head professor of the Magic Tower and a member of the disciplinary committee. At this point, Ephereine thought she would for sure be getting expelled. He continued and asked if she thought she had no fault in this incident, and pointed his question to Sylvia instead of Ephereine, surprising both of them. Even the old professor was surprised. Decoulaine pointed out that Sylvia could have easily prevented the incident, yet she made no efforts to do so. He asked if perhaps her abilities, which everyone expected so highly of, were not enough to stop it. Sylvia admitted and apologized, saying she didn't block Epherine's attack because she wanted Ephereine to get into bigger trouble. Ephereine wondered why he asked Sylvia instead of her, even though the fault was hers regardless. The old professor also brought up that same point, saying it was the attacker's fault. Decoulaine said that if they cared about context, it was his fault for being the one to make the lecture. Decoulaine asked if the old professor wanted him to take the blame. The old professor said he would never want that. Ephereine wondered why he would go so far as to refute the professor who was taking Sylvia's side, to defend her. The chairwoman said that was enough. She said kids are supposed to fight as they grow. She said it would be best to let the matter go this one time since they were both freshmen. Ephereine clenched her fist, thinking that the Decoulaine she knew would never do that. She was ready to be expelled once she heard him talk. The old man was still sucking up to Decoulaine, saying how Decoulaine extraordinarily analyzed the events for the students' sake. Just then, Ephereine called out to him and said she had a question. She wanted to ask if he remembered the last name Luna, if he remembered her dad, and if he knew that her dad suffered his entire life underneath Decoulaine before taking his own life. Decoulaine expected her to question him. Ephereine couldn't help but ask if Decoulaine remembered her father and how he died. But if he did remember, what if he rescinded the verdict just to protect himself? Or if he didn't even remember her father at all? Wouldn't that be even worse? She thought. Decoulaine replied that he didn't need to ask. He told her not to waste her potential on things of the past. She reaffirmed to herself that she was right. Decoulaine did know about her father. He protected her out of some sense of responsibility. But was it out of pity? She wasn't sure. Still, she was satisfied knowing that he hadn't forgotten her. At least, not yet. While in the car, Sylvia's father asked what happened. He told her she didn't need to worry about Ephereine anymore. He assured her that Ephereine had missed her window to hone her talents, and now wouldn't be a match for Sylvia. 10 years ago, on the day of the aptitude exam for entering the academy, Sylvia had first met Ephereine. The priest said that both of them had the talent to become archmages. Two of them, from the same fief, could one day reach the pinnacle of the magic world. It was a level even the emperor couldn't interfere with. Among the 3 seats, the first belonged to Archmage Demerkin. 2 seats remained empty at the time, but one was likely already designated for Adeline, the chairwoman of the university. Meaning Sylvia would have to fight Ephereine for the last remaining seat. She understood all this even without her father having to explain it. Her father had threatened Epherine's father into giving up on enrolling her in the academy. Sylvia knew that all of this was solely for her sake. to ensure she would have a smooth sail toward becoming an archmage. It was both her wish and her fate. When she remembered Ephereine asking if Sylvia was afraid of her catching up, she thought Ephereine was just unlucky. Her father told her that she should be more worried about Décollane than that Luna girl. He told her Décollane wasn't a simple man. Even if he seemed stuck now, he was once called a genius when he was young. He could soar high out of the blue, he said. Sylvia already knew that. He saw through her trap. She had pulled Epherine's mana intentionally. She had set up a trap that would explode when it came into contact with Epherine's mana. The larger the incident, the deeper the trouble Ephereine would fall into. But Décollane had seen through her plan instantly, even though she had been diligent enough to make sure no one was watching them. Yet, he made a compromise instead of exposing her. "I know everything, so go along with me," was essentially what he was saying. She had thought he was just an arrogant man with above-average talents. But now, she wondered if she had picked a fight with the wrong person. A few days later, in Décollane's manor, he got ready to attend an event. While riding in the car, he thought supporting Ephereine had been the right move, since he no longer sensed the presence of death creeping toward him. She never knew she was that Ephereine when she asked him the question in class. He realized she was likely hostile toward him even back then. He understood that Sylvia might hold a grudge against him now, but he had no choice. It was a matter of escaping certain death. He would have preferred to avoid social events, but there was much to gain from attending them. So he had to put up with it. He decided to check out some of the major characters while he was there. Once he reached the event, he was greeted by the servants. It was a party filled with nobles, many of whom he recognized. One in particular stood out: Ehelm, the very character Wu Jin had modeled himself. As he was thinking about Ehelm, an old man noticed him and came up to greet him. Once the other nobles realized that Décollane was at the party, they all rushed in to talk to him. Amid all the chatter, he heard a familiar name. He quickly walked past the nobles toward the person who mentioned it, someone called Ganesha. Getting acquainted with her, someone who would be an important turning point in the story among the adventurers, would be the greatest thing he could accomplish at this event. He walked throughout the party trying to find her. Unbeknownst to him, she was already watching from the balcony above, wary of him. He notices her, the woman with red pigtails and an adventurer outfit. When he tries to get to her, someone calls out to him, "Ehelm." He walks up to Décollane, asking how his research was going and telling Décollane about all the rumors there were about him, about how his research was stagnant for more than 3 years, and about how people are doubting his abilities. Décollane realizes that he was outwardly trying to taunt him. He used to be Décollane's peer in university. They used to be close, but after losing the head professor position to Décollane, he began holding a grudge of jealousy against him. Perhaps the original Décollane would have fallen for the provocations, but they didn't matter to Wu Jin. When Décollane glances at the balcony again, Ganesha was gone. Ehelm says that no one would like Décollane if he acted all high and mighty. Décollane gets angry that he lost Ganesha because of Ehelm and goes up to him and tells him to cut the bullshit and calls him a rotten cheese-like bastard before leaving quickly to find Ganesha. But he couldn't find her because everyone he came across tried to suck up to him, making him waste more time. When he came out to catch a breath outside, to his surprise, Ganesha was standing next to him. She asks if he was looking for her. He says he just came outside to escape the leeches, but since Ganesha talked to him first, he wondered if they were already acquainted. He tells her that he was just lost. She laughs and says that she knows he was looking for her. She apologizes for failing the mission he gave her. But she also tells him that his advance was paid back in full with the cancellation fee and asks him to let go of it just this once. She says she was sorry for not being able to bring the child talented in magic like he had asked. She tells him that she got attached and couldn't give them up to him. Décollane was planning to adopt a talented child to compensate for his own shortcomings. She asks if she can ask him a question, and he asks what she means. She asks how long he will keep living like that. Before he had possessed Décollane's body, he accepted the sweet talk from those who were of no help. He destroyed the trust of those around him and hurt many for his own fame. However, Woo Jin's only goal is to survive. He tells her that he will live differently, surprising Ganesha. She leans in and says that she wasn't expecting that response. She thought that he would have tried to kill her since she agreed to the mission and ran away. He tells her that she was just excessively concerned for no reason. Woo Jin knows that he would probably die if he tried to kill Ganesha, who was one of the strongest adventurers. Although she didn't look like it, she was extremely strong with attributes like an invincible body and mastery of all martial arts. She was a fighter and adventurer who reached the physical peak. And because Woo Jin possessed him, Deku Lane probably didn't have a chance to send assassins after her. She was wondering if he ate something wrong. Since he achieved his goal, he tells her that he will be heading back and asks her to not worry needlessly. She asks if he was really leaving and if it was really okay. She asks if there really won't be any assassinations or deaths. He turns back and says that all that is classless, silencing her. With his sister's power, he could use the Adventurers Guild to pressure Ganesha in the future if needed. One of Julie's relatives, Rayleigh, asks Julie how long she planned to stay at the event for. Julie says that she never wanted to come in the first place. Rayleigh tries to get Julie off the dining table, but Julie doesn't budge. She then asks how things were going with Deku Lane. Julie asks what Rayleigh means, and Rayleigh says that she was worried because there were so many rumors. Julie is angered when thinking back to that day. She says that it was obvious that things weren't going well. Rayleigh tells Julie to not be so loud. Just then, Julie notices Declan walking down the stairs. He ignores her and walks toward the entrance to leave the event. People were surprised that Deku Lane, who loved social gatherings, was leaving so early, and that too without even looking at his fiancée. Rumors started spreading that it was because of disharmony with Julie. But there was no way Woo Jin would know any of this. 1 week had passed after that event, and during that time, other than his daily training, he had also started working out. The reason being, he almost died while doing something crazy. A few days ago, he had tried to create another magic circle. If he had been a normal person, he would have surely died. But he managed to barely survive because of the Iron Man attribute. After meeting Ganesha, he started desiring greater strength. So he engraved fire control in addition to his existing engravement to strengthen his metal manipulation. This method would reduce the amount of time needed to learn magic, but in exchange, it was incredibly dangerous. After seeing the strain it put on his body firsthand, he decided to train his body and even developed a morning routine. After the training, he goes to work, and at his office, Alan presents him with something. A statement from the Magic Tower informing him about an audit hearing scheduled in 6 months regarding his advancements, asking him to prepare relevant documents before then. It was quite the unfavorable situation for Woo Jin, since Decalane's research had been at a standstill for more than 3 years. Losing the title of professor, which came with so many merits, would be equivalent to losing all his hopes of returning to Earth. He had to find something in Decalane's laboratory, and quickly. He went in hopeful, but as soon as he opened the door, it was a mess, like no one had been there for years. A particular heap of trash looked unnatural. He didn't know who the culprit was, but they knew full well that Decalene wouldn't bother going into the room after seeing this. But thankfully, Woo Jin had telekinesis to clean it up. It was a research book hiding within the trash, encrypted so no one could steal the research results. But it was useless, since his attributes could help him comprehend anything. The book glowed bright gold, signaling that the research was something very valuable. After going through it, he found that it was brilliant. But it was incomplete. It had torn pages and empty spaces, and even the logic at some points was incorrect. Despite all those flaws, it was still enough for him to understand how great it was. The bookmark had a childhood picture of Ephereine. It seemed like her father made an effort to hide this research from Deku Lane. The grudge the Luna family held against Deku Lane was clear. Because of Deku Lane, Ephereine had lived a brutal life. He closed the locket and said that he would complete the research papers. And if he managed to do so, he promised to add Luna's father's name on the paper as co-author. Of course, he had to be the main author to keep his professor job. Meaning, in the cafe, one of the girls said that all the commoners should stick together, since there were only 30 of them in the university. She asked for Epherine's opinion. Ephereine was surprised and thought that she used to be a noble too. But since she had no residence or land anymore, she might as well be a commoner. The girl said that Ephereine should also stick together with the rest of them no matter what. The others also chimed in, saying that Ephereine should be the representative for all the commoners, since she was also a victim of Sylvia. One of the boys said that if they wanted to make a club, they would need permission from a supervising professor. But he didn't think any professor would allow that for them. They started listing all the professors. "What about Professor Relan?" one asked. "There was no way, since he was always sucking up to nobles," another answered. "Professor Carmel would immediately turn away at the sight of commoners," another said. "Deculain would naturally not help them," a boy added. Ephereine was hoping that no one would eat the cake so she could have it later. Just then, her friend jumped up and asked Ephereine to try asking Deculain, not giving her a chance to refuse. Others also chimed in, saying that he seemed pretty fair compared to the others. He looked down on nobles and commoners without discriminating. The girl said that Ephereine avoided expulsion thanks to him, and that it might have been because she caught his eye. Ephereine said that it was nothing like that, and that he wasn't a great person like that. She didn't want to be involved with all this. She tried to run away. When her friend stopped her, she noticed someone behind Ephereine. It was Deculain. He told them to move, coldly. She was surprised to see him. Julia quickly teleported behind the door and wished Ephereine luck. Ephereine called Julia a coward. Deculain walked past her, but she stopped him and presented the document with a deep bow, asking him to sign it so they could create a club. She promised not to bother him, explaining that none of the other professors approved clubs for commoners. Deculain took the document, signed it quickly, and told her to send the club details to his office later, then handed it back. She couldn't believe he actually signed it. Julia came running out of her hiding spot, cheering and hugging Ephereine, saying she always knew she could do it. While in class, Ephereine wondered if Deculain was helping her out of guilt or sympathy. After all, he drove her father to death. Whatever he did now only felt fake to her. She thought that if he truly regretted what he did, he should reveal his true self and repent. Julia noticed Ephereine trembling and asked if she was okay, telling her not to care about people who had nothing better to do than gossip. Ephereine was confused until she looked in the direction Julia was staring. Sylvia and the noble girls were bad-mouthing her, calling her gross. Ephereine realized she had made herself the common enemy of all the nobles. Still, she said it was fine and told Julia to focus on the lecture. She then remembered hearing that Deculain's lectures were supposed to be different, and he didn't disappoint. He pulled out a book from nowhere and announced they'd be learning flowing fire in today's lecture. Deculain's previous lectures had been arrogant displays of power, but now they were beautiful demonstrations filled with creative explanations and elite-level understanding. It was a shock to all the mages, even Sylvia, who had long lost the joy of learning due to her natural talent. Using parameters typically used in water magic, he combined them with fire magic and demonstrated how flowing fire worked, stunning the entire class. Sylvia couldn't believe it. She didn't expect the lesson to go so in-depth. Most mages rely on intuition when casting spells. The theory behind magic is like a mold. If everyone followed it too closely, they'd all end up the same. That's the paradox of magic. To be elite, you need intuition, but you can't explain intuition. So for someone labeled a fraud genius to teach such a complex, theory-heavy lesson was nearly impossible. After class, the students admitted his lectures were nothing like the rumors. Even Ephereine had to admit she'd never been so focused in class before. But when she returned to her room, she sighed at the sight of graffiti on her door. Then she noticed a letter lying underneath. It was a sponsorship certificate. She thought it was a prank. Who in their right mind would sponsor someone hated by both Sylvia's family and Deculain? She figured she could at least report the fake certificate and get a reward. But when she went to the administration office, she was told the sponsorship was real. She couldn't believe it. Ecstatic, she slapped and pinched herself to make sure she wasn't dreaming. Then she quickly glanced around to ensure no one saw her reaction. Realizing it was worth 100,000 elni, she panicked and packed an emergency suitcase just in case. She regretted going to the office. The staff member there had given her a strange look. What if she was after Epherine's money too? "I should have been more careful," she shouted, accidentally bumping her head on the desk. It hurt, but she didn't wake up. Tears welled up in her eyes. Someone had finally recognized her talents. She was grateful that the world still had kind people in it. Wiping her tears, she pulled herself together and decided to try a little harder from then on. At Deculane's sister Eucline's manor, she gets word that Deculine has headed to an auction. She messes her hair while saying that the last time he went to an auction, he blew 10 million elne. She says that she won't forgive him if he causes more trouble for her. Meanwhile, Woojin is excited that he finally gets to buy what he wants. During his telekinesis training, he realized he needed some metal to compensate for his lack of skill. The item he has now is made of wood steel, but this was just a temporary patch. What he really needs will be available in this auction. He enters the VVIP waiting room and immediately notices Julie. She also quickly looks back at him and stands up from her seat to face him. She says that she hopes he was fine, with a cold look. Woojin wasn't really pleased to meet her there. She says that she heard about him sending 2 young mages to the disciplinary committee this time. He tells her that it was old news at this point and asks if she wanted to blame that on him as well. She thinks for a second and tells him that they were newly appointed debutante mages and asks if he intended to crush the dreams of rookies with despair. She tells him that his sins will come back to haunt him one day and tells him to change his ways. She tells him this was the last piece of advice she could offer. Woojin realizes that Julie intends to cut off her relationship with Deculine completely. This was good news for Woojin. No matter how beautiful she was, he didn't intend to marry someone so unstable. And around her, there were many variables which would lead to his death. He could literally die on the day of marriage. He simply nods to her words, and she storms off. He remembered that she wasn't the type of person to go to an auction and asks if she came all this way just to tell him that. She quickly turns back with a surprised face and starts going off on him, saying that he was so full of himself and that there was no way she would do such a thing. She says she came because she needed something, and that she would never do it because of Deculine. Woojin says that he gets it and asks her to calm down. He says that saying it once was enough and she starts pouting. He finds her quite cute while she leaves, but suddenly realizes it. Why did his emotions suddenly change, even though he was thinking how dangerous being around her would be just a second ago? He wonders if he was being influenced by Deculine's emotions, even though he was being careful to keep his personality from being corrupted. They announce that the auction will soon begin. He brushes his thoughts off as if he was overthinking stuff. The first item is a normal-looking vase. In his eyes, it is glowing bright gold, signaling that it's a good investment. A bunch of people bid on it, but he outbids everyone and buys it for 2.5 million. The vase doesn't lose any light even after going up so far in price. He still had 205 million in his bank, so he decides to invest in a few more items. He buys a ring for 3 million, scissors for 2.1 million, a necklace for 4.3 million, and another item for 5.5 million. The others start wondering what was happening, seeing him buy everything. Julie thinks that he's doing it for attention. She can't believe he would waste so much money for a moment of vanity. She was just there to obtain an item called Winter's Fire. It was the final item in the auction. Winter Fire, the Snowflare Stone. This was the element Woojin was talking about. One of the rarest metals in the world, typically used to forge extremely powerful weapons. An item that holds both hot and cold energies. The only item that would surpass this would be dragon bones, effectively making it the best ingredient for him. Julie also wanted it for her sword. The price starts at 10 million and quickly jumps to 30 million. When Julie is about to bid on it, she hears Deculine bidding 31 million. She quickly turns around, angry and annoyed. Deculine is only focused on the rock. While they go back and forth bidding on the rock, Some people say that he's trying to get it so he can gift it to his fiancée, who is a swordswoman. Some say he's so deeply in love with her that he can't let her buy it on her own. Deculain doesn't even know that he's competing with Julie. He understands that she might hold a grudge against him if he takes this away from her. But too bad for her. He needs it more. This is the first time it's been available in 3 years, and who knows when it'll be back. Julie thinks the same. Both of them don't seem to want to give up on this item. Eventually, the final call is made at 42 million elnis. The winner, Deculain. Spectators are thrilled, calling it the most intense auction in recent memory. Rumors fly again. Some say he'll gift it to Julie, just like last year when he lavished her with luxurious presents on the day of their engagement. But to her, that was the worst day of her life. In front of all his riches, she felt only humiliation. She had wanted a promise to be fulfilled, not expensive things. That day, she left and broke off the engagement. But the fallout didn't end there. Rumors swirled, claims that she had fallen for Deculain, or that she begged for a knight captain's post in his sister's order. She suspects Deculain himself spread those lies to lure her back. No matter how hard she tried, she could never love a man like him. Then, Deculain approaches and asks if she had also wanted the snowflare stone. She assumes he's mocking her again, but instead, he apologizes for taking it. Then, without another word, he walks away. Julie is stunned. The Deculain she knew would never have apologized. After the auction, Julie is called by her sister Josephine, who tells her to get in the car. Back at Euclid Manor, Woo Jin senses that Julie is undoubtedly angry. Yet strangely, he doesn't feel that familiar looming sense of death. He wonders how far Deculain must have pushed her in the game to drive her to murder. When he returns to the manor, the atmosphere is tense. He asks what's wrong. Someone tells him that Yariel is home. His sister. She's standing in the corridor and immediately confronts him. The funds he used at the auction, she says, were meant to pay for the mines. Was this why he had taken her money? He tries to reassure her, saying everything he bought will turn a profit. But she explodes. She says he's been treating her like a garbage can, someone to clean up his messes. She cries, revealing that the estate hasn't been doing well financially. The workers and she have been working tirelessly to keep things running, while he goes and gambles away all their savings. She accuses him of wasting everything their parents left behind and using up 150 million elnis in a single day. The pressure builds. Woo Jin can feel death creeping closer. One wrong word here and he's finished. But if he backs out now, he'll lose too much. He makes a decision. He offers her the position of family head. She freezes, shocked. She asks if he's serious, and he says yes. She thinks he's lying, but he swears to make a mage's oath, a binding vow that kills the one who breaks it. She can hardly believe it. She warns him that if he goes back on this, she'll kill him herself. Then, determined, she rushes off to deal with the aftermath of the auction. Woo Jin sighs in relief. It felt like a storm had just passed, but at least he survived. Maybe if he keeps making bold, calculated moves like this, he can escape his fate. Just then, Ganesha, who had been spying on him, comments that he really did mean it about changing. Woo Jin calls her an unwanted guest, but she apologizes, saying she saw something shocking. Woo Jin explains that Yariel is better suited to be the family head anyway. There's no need for her to be surprised. But Ganesha drops a bombshell. Yariel doesn't have a single drop of Euclid blood. Woo Jin is stunned. He had never heard that before. Yariel was supposed to be his half-sister, so Woo Jin already knew they weren't biologically related. But this was the first time he heard they weren't related at all. Ganesha asked if it was all right, reminding him that he was the one who'd asked her to look into his background in the first place. Woo Jin composed himself and said it didn't matter. Ganesha noted that he had surprised her quite a bit today. Before leaving, she promised to keep the secret about his relationship with Yariel safe. But she also left a warning. The Six Snakeheads organization had started moving. They were after the items he purchased from the auction. While the auction house might safely deliver them, his estate's magical defenses were so weak that even Ganesha could easily break in. With that, she disappeared, leaving only a handkerchief behind. Wu Jin sat and processed everything he'd just heard. The revelation about Yeriel didn't matter to him. He wasn't Dekulane after all, and nothing about his treatment toward her would change. Meanwhile, deep in the jungle where Ganesha had made camp, she warmed herself by a fire and spoke to her companions. She said Dekulane was acting like a completely different person now. Even someone like him seemed different when he spoke with kindness. One of her men teased that she was just weak to handsome guys and would have liked him no matter what. She jokingly threatened to tear him apart for calling her out. When he claimed his grandma thought he was handsome, she laughed and said a handsome guy must have been walking behind him when she said that. A relative of Julie's, who worked as an adventurer, asked if Dekulane now had a human side. Ganesha confirmed they wouldn't need to keep him under surveillance anymore. He didn't seem interested in enslaving magic users anymore. Before they left, she told everyone to keep what she said a secret. Then they gathered and teleported out of the forest. The next day at the university, Wu Jin was pondering ways to improve his combat strength when Alan knocked and entered. He handed him a copy of the Wizard's Journal, which had published a warning about the infamous wizard killer Lockhart, the greatest threat to any mage. But Wu Jin wasn't concerned. He wasn't just any mage, and he even hoped he might run into Lockhart. As he got ready to head to the library, he asked Alan if he was interested in becoming an assistant professor. Alan immediately said yes without thinking. Then, realizing what he had said, nervously asked if Dekulane was really recommending him, even after constantly claiming he had no talent. Wu Jin replied that he'd changed his mind after seeing how earnest Alan was. Though truthfully, he'd simply received a notice that it was time to pick an assistant professor. He handed Alan a bangle engraved with the Eucline emblem. Alan bowed deeply, eyes welling with tears. While Alan was overcome with emotion, Wu Jin simply thought that it would have been a waste to let someone so good at organizing and handling tasks go. Unlike others who left Dekulane begrudgingly, Alan had remained loyal despite everything. Wu Jin handed him some money and told him to go celebrate with a nice dinner. Alan tried to refuse. It was too much. But Wu Jin had already turned and walked away. He made his way to the staff-only section of the library, hoping to find anything related to the Luna family, or perhaps even a manipulation grimoire to patch the flaws in the spell paper he'd found earlier. As he was scanning the area, he noticed someone familiar. Sylvia. He immediately asked what she was doing inside a staff-only library, catching her completely off guard. 10 minutes before Dekulane arrived, Sylvia had come looking for her study material, and the librarian had asked Professor Relan what she was supposed to do. The professor, who always sucked up to nobles, of course allowed her to go inside since Sylvia was the successor of the Ilad family. Her hobby was to study literature and language. She had come to the staff-only library to find a novel written in Ephereine, the language of the fairies. After the fairies had disappeared, the value of anything written in their language had increased, making this novel increasingly rare. She visited this library knowing that it had this book. And of course, she didn't think she would run into Dekulane here. He asked if she wanted to have another disciplinary committee meeting. She wondered why he was here, even though she had heard he never came here. She told him she had received permission from Professor Relan. He asked if Professor Relan and the librarian condoned violating school regulations, and said that they might also be deserving of discipline. He used his magic to pull away the book she was holding. He asked if she broke the rules of the school just to find a romance novel. She blushed and asked how he could read Ephereine. She then said that she was just interested in the literature and language. He told her that he would let it slide this time, but warned her not to do this again without proper permission, unless her goal was to flaunt her family's influence. While he walked away, she thought that she was just humiliated by him, and wondered how he could read the language of the fairies. Later that day, during practical training in the forest, one of the professors was impressed by how composed all the students were, even though they were in the mountain of darkness. The mountain was a place of considerable significance and was kept under strict security by the university. It served as a training ground for real experience. Due to the dangerous beasts and creatures, the university enforced protective barriers and ensured patrols by an on-duty professor. Professor Relin, who was already out of breath, asked Decolane who they should appoint as the on-duty professor this week. Decolane said that he would do it. Relin began praising how noble Decolane was for being considerate of the students' safety, but Wu Jin just felt a weird sense pulling at him and wanted to investigate it. The other professors left him, and 9 hours later, at the cafe, Ephereine treated a bunch of her friends to expensive ice cream because she now had 100,000 elni. They asked if it was really all right to eat it, and Ephereine told them not to hold back. Julia said that she had already submitted the club establishment plan and told the others to consider this the first gathering of the club. One of the boys hoped that others wouldn't hesitate to join since not many people seemed to be signing up. Julia assured them there was no need to worry as long as they ran the club well. They talked about the training session in the Mountain of Darkness, and Ephereine said that 50 students had volunteered for it even though accidents happened so frequently there. Just then, they sensed an ominous feeling. They ran out to see what it was, but not seeing anything outside the building, they ran toward the mountain, where they could hear someone begging for help. Julia tried to stop them, saying something felt wrong, but Ephereine ignored her and ran straight into a teleportation trap. She was teleported into the deep forest. She heard the person begging nearby and said she was coming to help. She noticed a woman looking wounded in front of her. Before her eyes, the woman got hit and screamed in pain. Ephereine turned around after seeing that the attack came from behind her. To her surprise, it was Decolane. She asked why he attacked a helpless civilian like that. Decolane asked if she could open her eyes and tell him which part of the demon looked like a helpless woman. The woman had turned into a demon. Decolane asked if Ephereine had fallen for a demon's illusion magic that easily. He used telekinesis to pull her away and told her not to interfere, asking her to get lost. He dragged her away from the fight with his telekinesis. Turning to the demon, he said it was time to hunt. The demon seemed furious after losing its easy prey. It lunged at him, and he dodged its attack. The ones he couldn't dodge, he blocked with the metal elements he had created. After analyzing the demon, he understood that due to the core on its forehead, it was probably a demon that specialized in illusions, and thanks to his attributes, his metal attacks were ineffective against it. Decolane's blood was boiling due to his lineage. The Euclines were renowned for hunting demons since ancient times, and now the lineage was manifesting in Decolane. He could never let a demon before him survive. He felt a rage he had never felt before while looking at the demon. After that point, the fight ended in a flash. Decolane didn't stop insulting the demon even after its death. He understood that the appearance of the demon was where the game he made was meant to start. 2 days later, in the infirmary, Ephereine woke up from her sleep and suddenly jumped up. She asked the nurse what happened in the woods, and the nurse explained that there was a demon appearance in the Mountain of Darkness, and Ephereine had been bewitched by the demon and passed out. She was later found and moved to the clinic. The mountain was shut down, and investigations were still ongoing. The nurse also told Ephereine that Decolane was the one who saved her, and she wasn't too pleased to hear that. She also mentioned that Ephereine had been sleeping for 36 hours. Ephereine realized that it was Wednesday and quickly ran off, saying that she was late. She reached the class with barely any time left. Julia waved to her and called her over. Julia said she went to the clinic to see Ephereine, but she wasn't awake. Ephereine replied that she was in the best possible condition because of all the sleep she got. Ephereine noticed ingredients on the desk and asked Julia if she missed out on something. Julia said that the ingredients were already there before she arrived. Decolane walked in with Alan, who was holding a box. Ephereine wondered who Alan was. Decolane announced to the class that Alan would be his teaching assistant. Students whispered among themselves, saying that they thought Decolane liked teaching alone, and that he had never had a teaching assistant. Ephereine thought it made no sense. Her father had been a researcher until his 30s because he wasn't able to become Decolane's teaching assistant. She wondered why Decollane would suddenly take in an unknown mage as his assistant. Decollane explained that they would be learning by experience and asked them to solve the task given to them in 3 hours. Alan gave each of them a timer. Ephereine looked at the bracelet she inherited. Whenever she looked at it, she asked herself what her father meant to Decollane. Why didn't Decollane give her father a chance? Why was he changing his ways now? She tried to focus on the task and think of a spell, but her mind was filled with different thoughts. At 25 minutes and 15 seconds, one student was already finished with the task. Of course, it was Sylvia. Decollane walked over to check her work and said her spell was perfect. He exempted her from the class. While leaving, she glanced at Ephereine, who was struggling, and scoffed. Ephereine tried extra hard now to finish quickly. Julia finished next, and after her, others slowly completed the task one by one. Everyone except Ephereine. She thought she was done for. Not only did she fail to do better than Sylvia, but she hadn't even finished anything by the end of the class. She wondered why she was like this. She asked herself if she was just stupid and couldn't even do something so simple. She thought she should just give up. She didn't even go to the academy. How could she compete with the others? Just then, Decollane announced that it had been 5 hours and 47 minutes. He asked how long she planned to make him wait. Ephereine thought he had left as soon as class ended. He said she had broken down over a simple assignment and couldn't even finish it. She apologized. He told her that even if people laugh at her, even if someone is ahead of her, and even if the person she resents is right in front of her, she has to stay cold and logical at all times. With that advice, he told her that she would never reach his level with the weak mindset she currently had. He said he was disappointed in her and had expected more. After saying that much, he left the room. She stood there for a while. Then she sat back down at her desk. Clenching her fist, she said that she could do this, even if he was disappointed in her. And she continued trying to finish her task. Decollane was still waiting for her to finish outside. He thinks that even though he wasted over 6 hours on Ephereine, it was a necessary cost to make her grow faster for what is to come. Because of the demon appearance, he knew that the main quest was starting soon. Once it does, characters with the good alignment would be very important. And among them, if he had a stronger than usual Ephereine, it would be a game changer. Right now, she lacked mental fortitude and the sensibilities of magic, but once she overcomes these, she would show overwhelming growth. Of course, there was a chance her growth would pose a danger to him, but it was a risk worth taking. Fate was nothing more than a religion for those who don't put in effort, and since he believes in himself, and with Decollane's personality, he would hardly allow a young mage like her to catch up to him. Ephereine opens the door to the class and walks out. Decollane quickly goes inside to check on her task, and she had completed it. He notes that she completed it in 6 hours and 25 minutes. He writes that she displayed the innate flaws of a non-academy graduate. However, the quality of the results was worthy of being considered for first place. When he left the university, a man in a white suit approaches him, his fiancée Julie's brother, Zeit. A cold sweat rolls down his cheek as he gives Zeit a shallow bow. He was the current head of the Frightened family and the one who strongly pushed for Decollane and Julie's betrothal. And more importantly, he was even stronger than Ganesha in combat strength, putting him in the place of the third strongest. Why would he come looking for someone like Decollane? Wu Jin wondered. Maybe it was for the Snowflare Stone. But if that was the case, this would be a death variable, and Wu Jin had no cards against a monster like Zeit. Zeit stands in front of Decollane, towering over him. He says that he was just worried since Decollane and Julie haven't been getting along well recently. He tells Decollane that he plans to arrange a dinner within a week and asks if it was all right with him. Wu Jin is glad that Zeit seems friendly, for now. Wu Jin agrees to the dinner, but before he can even finish, Zeit places his massive hand on Decollane's shoulder and says that he likes people with quick decision-making and promises to prepare a menu that suits Decullian's tastes. He also says that he will take responsibility for the dinner before leaving, as if it was a threat not to miss it. Woo Jin wanted to push it off to another time, but he wasn't given a chance to refuse. Zeit was a person who held his household above all else, and who knew what he would have done if Deculaine were to interfere with his plans. The next day at the Frieden household, there was a commotion early in the morning. Julie refuses to attend the dinner since the both of them hate each other, and she was already busy training with the knights to make up time to meet with Deculaine. Zeit asks if she was sulking just because one measly snowflare stone was stolen from her. She tells him that she wasn't sulking, and a knight of the Frieden family was watching them argue back and forth. Zeit tells her that Deculaine must have surely bought the stone to make it into a weapon for her, since a mage would never need something like that. She shouts and says that if he were to really present her with a sword, she would immediately break off the engagement. Zeit loses his calm and asks her to think carefully. He reminds her that breaking off the engagement would be foolish, and that there was no place for emotions in politics. He says that he was sure there was no man she was interested in being with, and asks if she had found someone she had taken a liking to. She assures him that there's no one like that. He asks if it was because of Deculane's poor record, and she says that it has nothing to do with it. He asks her to give a valid reason, and she just stays quiet. After waiting a bit for an answer, he loses patience and leaves, asking her to be on time and settle the problem at the dinner if there were any. After her brother left, she clenches her fist before unsheathing her sword and performing random attacks into thin air. The knight behind her addresses her and says that her sword was rather turbulent. His name was Veron. She apologizes for showing a disgraceful side of herself. He says that it was no big deal and that he understands. He says that he never once believed that an abominable man like Deculaine was suitable for her, and for her brother to forcefully push her to marry such a man was too much. She stops him. She tells him that it doesn't suit a knight to speak ill of others behind their back. She looks at him and tells him not to dirty his hands for her sake, with a smile, after which she simply leaves. Varen, however, was plotting something. He thinks that he had found the answer for the anguish and suffering, a way to prove his loyalty as her vassal. Something only he could do. He promises to make her happy. At the Bercht Assembly of the Elders, the news of demon sightings in the Mountain of Darkness is discussed. The Union says that they have to take action soon, as the demons have appeared. The Elders decide to send letters to the 12 sorcerers. One of the letters was addressed to Deculaine. Back at Deculaine's manor, the items he had bought at the auction were finally delivered. He decides to keep the ring and the necklace he had bought to help with mana recovery. The rest he decides to store in a vault for safekeeping, as per Ganesha's suggestion. However, there was one problem. The most important item, he couldn't move it an inch with his telekinesis. He wondered if the mana inside the stone was resisting him. Then he remembered something he had read in the library. A flame sword must be tamed. It was written in a book called Communion. Could that mean forming an understanding with the item itself? He wondered, while reaching his hand out to touch it. As soon as he touches it, his expression turns into a pained one, and the room fills with a bright light. He lets go of it quickly. To comprehend a mere 0.1% of the item, he had used 2,000 mana. It would take at least a year, he thought. Was it the best use of his time? He puts the thought aside, as it was about time to get ready for the dinner Zeit had arranged. But looking closely at the calendar, he saw another event 3 days from then. It was marked before he had possessed the body. The death anniversary, he whispered. He reaches the high-end restaurant and is greeted by Zeit. Zeit thanks Deculaine for coming and says that Julie was already waiting inside. Zeit says that Julie looked gorgeous dressed like that. She looked so beautiful he was taken aback. He thinks that there was no wonder Deculaine fell for her. Wu Jin didn't know since she always wore armor around him. He then hears an unknown voice saying that they had to put a lot of effort to make Julie look like that. Zeit asks why she was there, and she says that she tagged along since she had to pick out a dress for Julie anyway. Wu Jin hadn't noticed her since he was drawn to Julie. But it was Josephine, Julie's sister. Although she's acting like she came along with her sister for the marriage meeting, she was someone Deculaine must be on guard against above anyone else. someone who would use any means to achieve her goals. She was a sociopath, the owner of an undercover intelligence network that worked behind the scenes. Her strength was also comparable to that of Zeit. The only one Josephine truly cherishes was Julie. Because of that, wronging Julie would incur Josephine's wrath. He didn't know why she hadn't killed Deculin yet, but he could definitely feel it. Ever since he noticed her, she was displaying murderous intent upon seeing him. The fact that he could feel that sociopath's murderous intent meant that his death variable was very dangerous. He had to show that Deculin was serious about Julie if he wanted to make it out alive. Zeit says that they should get right down to business before the meal arrives. He asks when Deculin would like to hold the ceremony. Since it has already been more than 3 years since the engagement, Julie tries to stop him. But he quickly stops her and says that the adults were talking. Wu Jin hesitates to speak, and Zeit asks him to speak his mind. Deculin glances at Josephine before answering that he will leave the relationship fully in Julie's hands. He says that he is ready to dissolve the engagement if she doesn't want to marry him. Julie only looks angrier. Zeit asks how he could speak of dissolving the engagement so carelessly. He asks if it was because the two of them have been distant lately. He tells Deculin that the elders of the family would never approve of such a thing. Julie raises her voice again and asks her brother to let her talk privately with Deculin. Zeit looks at Deculin and leaves the room with Josephine. Josephine says that she hopes the two of them have a nice chat. As soon as they leave, Julie breaks the silence and asks what Deculin was plotting this time. With a cold look, she asks what he wanted this time. Outside, Josephine could clearly hear their conversation. Thank you for watching the video. Please leave a like if you liked the video and let me know if you want a part 2 in the comments.